Hello internet friends, Chris Masto here. Welcome to day 2 and part 2 of my Shaper Origin unboxing, review, test, whatever you want to call it. Right off the bat, I want to apologize for the poor sound quality and in general poor quality of this video. In an attempt to get this done this weekend, I am skipping a lot of steps here, especially time-consuming things, and that includes setting up sound and lighting and everything else. So what I really want to do is I just want to accomplish cutting something. I've already spent about an hour just setting this up, and that's one of the concerns I have with doing this kind of work. If I want to cut something in my Glowforge laser cutter, it's pretty straightforward. I have sheets of material that fit in the machine and I can just put them in. Maybe I need to tweak settings a little bit, but generally they just go in. Similarly with 3D printing, I find that very easy to get something started. I might have to put a different color plastic in the machine than the one it's using, but other than that, at least the Lulzbot Mini that I have, I find is very easy to make it just go. And when I do any sort of CNC milling, I spend hours and hours and hours fixturing things. So we're going to see how this goes. This should be a little more straightforward than CNC milling, but I did have to, I don't have a lot of materials around here, so I had to dig out this thick piece of MDF, which I'm going to use as a spoil board here underneath it. And then the only thing I have is really, really crappy plywood that I got from Home Depot, who knows when. It's been sitting in the garage. It's terribly warped. So first of all, I had to cut this down a bit because the sheet that I had was, I guess, maybe about 4 by 4 feet, and it had a huge hump in it, and I thought I could just sort of put that down here, but it was so badly bent there was no way it was going to work. So I figured I'd cut something a little smaller and maybe I'd luck out and actually be able to do something with it. This piece, you might be able to tell, I don't know if you can tell from the overhead shot, it's pretty warped, but you know, it's just really cheap plywood. So I think we're going to see how this works, but and if I just hold it down with some clamps along the edges that I'm able to clamp, which is not all of them, hopefully I'll be able to accomplish something with this. So I want to get started. Again, I want to see how this machine works. I'm not making anything to keep, so it doesn't really matter if there are some technical difficulties, but we'll see. So first thing is I'm going to put some double-sided tape on the back of this because I don't want those states popping out. I guess I have to sort of make a guess as to where I'm going to be working. This, again, they do tell you ahead of time, like when they're preparing to ship the thing, they're like, here's the stuff you're probably going to need. And that includes things like double-sided tape and clamps and materials to work with. But actually, I'm just going to go for it here. I didn't have a lot of time to go shopping, and unfortunately, the only double-sided tape I have, this is really good and expensive, so I'm hesitant to waste a lot of it. It's also fairly narrow, so I'm going to see if I can find some some wide and less expensive tape. But in any event, this is, again, to keep, when I cut the pieces out, I'm going to use that US map file just that comes with the machine because that'll save me the time of having to design something. And in theory, as I cut each of those states out, they're going to want to go flying. And this tape is supposed to hold them in place. It did on the demo video anyway from the company. I'm probably leaning into the shot here. I hate it when I get myself in these overheads, but I'm struggling here on the tape. So we're going to probably do an edit here. Okay, now I've got a bunch of tape down in this area, so the key thing now is to flip this plywood over, try to remember just this general area here, where I have the tape. So we'll put the plywood down, and I will again apply my clamps. On the theory that this is the quickest and easiest way. I've also considered setting up a folding card table, because then I could walk all the way around. Here I don't have access to the back of this work table, unfortunately, so that is an issue. Okay, this is relatively flat. It's not super flat over there, but I don't have access to clamp that. I am just going to restrict my working area to this area here. Okay, now, to make this a fair test, I have to get the machine out of the box. So here is my ventilation hose, dust extraction hose. This, by the way, I asked in the last video, can I put the machine in here with this guard on? Sadly, the answer is no, because then this foam doesn't fit in there because the guard sticks out from the machine and this foam interferes with it. So that is a bit of a downside. It means keeping that piece separate. Okay. And I do need some of the bits from here. Literally bits. Well, I guess they're mills. Router bits. I don't know. All right. Okay, so there's the machine out of its case. Again, I need to keep the little twist tie around in order to put it away. Maybe I can keep it in this bag. There's the machine. Oh, I need to remove the protective blue piece. Now I can at least temporarily stick that there. Let's get the parts out of here. I need the tape that I've already opened. I need the hex key. I need the wrench. And I need the 1/8 inch upcut bit. I think that would be this one. Yep. Okay. Stuff I'm not using, I'll put back in the pouch. I suspect the thing that makes sense to do first, while everything's powered off, is to install the bit. So you should be able to just slip that in. Is this open? Oh, hold the button down. There we go. Loosen the collet, slip that in. Tighten it up. Apply the wrench. There we go. Should be good. Gotta keep the little vial that it comes in. Now we can put this back. You can tighten it. Guard on, plug it in, and now plug in the origin. Just make sure that I have enough cord here to go where I need to go. Yeah, that'll be fine. Okay. Shaper is booting up. In the meantime, I'm going to address my dust extraction. All I have right now is a terrible shop vac. Which is loud. There we go. Your origin has been updated and can do even more. Exciting. Okay. Yeah, I have this shop vac which doesn't, I mean, it has a not very flexible hose, and this connector doesn't fit on there. This adapter doesn't really work. Let's see, hopefully I can use this thing that came with the machine. Of course, they've cable tied it on. So we'll just remove these, which is going to make it harder to store. Okay, put it right there. Let's see how this works. I think this end goes on there. Or does this end go? This end goes on there. Get it all unfurled. Okay. Doesn't feel right. Did I do it backwards? No. I guess it just doesn't feel right in general. Okay. Alright. Put that on there. Ah, friction fit things. And then I should be able to, okay, so does this now couple to my shop vac hose in any useful way? Not really. Can I contraption it? Yeah, I guess. What a contraption. Okay. So this adapter, which never fit well in the first place, goes on there, and then I think this vaguely kind of sort of, I mean, as long as it doesn't fall off, which it might. Okay, best I can do. Okay, I have an actual legitimate Festool vacuum coming soon. So, here we go. I've now confirmed that the space available is going to work. So let me put down a bunch of special tape here. I'm going to try putting the tape vertically. I think that will give me results more in line with what I'm looking for. So I'm going to put one here as far over as I can. Make sure to push it down this time. I noticed in my video when I said the tape is popping up, that was entirely my fault. I hadn't really pushed it down hard in the first place. What happens if I go over here now and scan? Start scan. If I scan this whole area, I will retrieve my safety glasses, some hearing protection, not ideal. Okay, so, yep, I should be fine because this area here in which I want to work is all, well, I guess I can go up as far as that before it gets mad at me. It's interesting. So yeah, you do have to have some. Tape is peeling off in the back because, I mean, I'm sticking tape to plywood. What do you expect? And then I'm rubbing it at the bottom of this machine. Okay, let's just go cut. Wait. No. First I need to import something. It's interesting that it lets you select cut when there's nothing to cut. Okay, US map. Now let's place this. I want to place this as far south as I possibly can. So right, let's go over here even. Yeah. Go right along the edge. So I'm going to place that over here. Hopefully I've given myself enough room to do New York. Let's see. If I place that here, okay. Yeah. It seems like that'll generally work. Okay, cool. So now let's choose cut, and let's choose depth. Let's go 1/8 inch. I think this is 1/8 inch plywood. Don't know if I can cut the whole way. I guess we'll find out. I'm going to cut on the line. I don't want an offset. I have the 1/8 inch bit in here. And now if I press Z touch, it should touch off the workpiece. Test plunge and remove your hands from the, tap plunge and remove your hands from the tool. Okay. So this should find its 0. Seems to have done so. Okay. Alright, I'm going to put on my safety glasses. I'm going to put on my ear things. I'm going to press start cutting because I want to see if it tells me to turn the spindle on. Safety first. Use the green button on the handle. Dismiss. Oh, okay, you can't touch the... Alright, so I'll just turn the spindle on now. It's on speed 5 out of 6. I don't really know what to make of that. I guess I should have read the instructions. Alright, let's turn this on. Nothing happened. Oh, interesting. I mean, maybe it powers itself up. That's good. So when I was complaining the other day, first of all, it wasn't plugged in all the way. Let's see. Anyway, that's on. Now we're going to turn the vacuum on. Here, see if yeah, that cut almost all the way through. So I think I can now do that again, and I can set the depth to slightly deeper. How about 0.2? Okay, let's try again. Okay, there we go. So that's completely free. It's just that the tape is doing its job and holding it down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this back. I don't think you're supposed to cut deeper than the diameter of the tool. So I'm going to put this back to 1/8 inch. I'm going to do 2 passes. And I'm going to cut out New York State. I'm going to cut out a few different states here and just see how I can do sort of rapid fire. hopefully my camera battery will hold out for just a few more minutes. Spindle on. Okay, cool. So I might say that I did a couple mistakes on purpose to see what would happen, but in fact I didn't do that on purpose. I made a couple mistakes for reals, so it's interesting to see. First of all, I mean, it's definitely very easy to use. It has a weird feeling, but you quickly get used to it, especially like when you go around corners. When you go around fancy parts, it moves, you know, to keep up with it. It's like jumpy, but that's what it's supposed to be doing. And then on the straightaways, you can really kind of zoom it. So, a couple things I'll note. When I did New York here, so I did everything with a 1/8 inch pass, and then I did a 0.2 inch pass after that to cut through the rest of the way. So first let's just see if these actually come out, or if I was mistaken. Oh, how about that? I thought I cut through, but I did not cut through. Maybe this is cool. Okay, back to the, so I didn't shut it off. Okay, lessons learned. I guess when I first put the tape on the back of this thing, in my mind I was picturing relatively large blocks for the States, so I figured if I put that tape in those strips, it would cover, even if the state of New York or something, is about this big, then the tape would hit it somewhere. But these are very tiny. So I immediately lost several of these to the vacuum because they weren't taped down. And then I tried over here to leave some tabs manually, but apparently failed to do so well enough, so that one got lifted up as well. And then for the last two, I did manage eventually to leave some tabs so that I didn't lose these guys. But they're very small pieces. I did not, oh, and this had tape underneath it. That's probably the only reason I didn't lose it. The tape just happened to hit that perfectly. So lesson learned, I guess, if you're gonna cut out very small pieces, make sure that you've got them taped down. Other than that, you can see here the tape didn't cut through nicely, but so what, I guess, maybe. Oh, and the other thing I started to say was, when I was doing New York here, I got a little, so I did the first pass at 0.125, and then I went to 0.13. Anyway, it wasn't enough, but when I went around the second time, I kind of got ahead of myself, and I forgot that I didn't press retract when I finished, and I went over, and then you can see here there's a little gouge. So the machine retracts the bit as soon as you go off the line, but that's not necessarily going to save you. So I was kind of under the impression that it was like a saw stop type of situation where as soon as you go off that line, pow, it stops cutting. But it takes long enough to retract that I guess if you screw up, you don't want to screw up. Other than that, I'd like to try this again with a larger, maybe I can zoom in, and I don't know how this software works. They did a really good job with the vacuum port, so clearly, they're channeling all of the airflow right where it needs to be, which is great, which is also why I lost these pieces. It really grabs hold. So I guess my question is, I've got my workspace set up. Is there any way, if I just wanted a nice, since I think I have tape along here, if I wanted to place a nice big New York State there that I could cut out for sure, can I do that? Okay, I think I've accomplished my goal of placing a sort of very large, this time, and upside down New York State. So I'm going to go into the cut mode, and I'm going to set this back. So I'm going to do one at 1/8 and then another one at 1/4. And I'm just going to turn on the spindle. let's see what we've got. It's an interesting fact. Backing this out a little bit. Okay, interesting learning from this one is even when you're trying, I guess it just takes some practice to get used to staying on that line, because I accidentally went off it a couple of times, even though I was trying to do this one perfectly. Okay, there we go. So with a nice big knot in the plywood in the middle of it, but okay, so that's big enough that, let's see if I can tell where my mistakes were. Not really. My mistakes were kind of slow enough and close to the edge enough that it didn't really ruin anything. So yeah, again, I mean, if I wanted to cut something out of plywood and I didn't want to use the laser, or if I wanted to cut it out of something that I can't use the laser for, or I think I could do thicker things with this, various reasons why I might want to use this thing, or especially if the piece doesn't fit in the laser, that's a big deal, then I think that's probably where I'll be using this thing. The other thing that was interesting is when I got up around this area, oops, I shouldn't be moving it by the spindle. When I got up around this area here, it started to complain that there was not enough tape. In fact, once it retracted because there wasn't enough markers visible. So the thing is, like when you're over there, the spindle is cutting here, but the camera is way up here. So there's not enough, you really have to have enough material in front of the machine to be able to do that. Now I worked around that by just turning it to the side so it was able to see some of these. So there is sort of that option, but you do have to plan and you have to be able to have sufficient material available. I think what I saw on the forum people talk about doing is they'll put another piece of board over there, but it's very important that it has to be exactly the right height, and it has to be completely flat and with no gap, so it will confuse the vision system otherwise. So there we go, my expanded first cutting test with the Shaper Origin. It is a very interesting machine, I will say that, and I look forward to thinking up some things in the future that I will need and want to use this for. But until then. So now I thought it would be fun to do a bit of an apples to apples comparison. So this is the New York State that I cut out with the Shaper Origin. And of course here is my Glowforge laser cutter. So I'm going to try to cut the same thing out, and we'll compare sort of the process, the pros and cons, how the time it takes, and so on and so forth, the various gotchas that can be involved. By the way, I wouldn't call myself a Glowforge expert, but I'm certainly not as naive about it as I am with the Shaper Origin. So for the purpose of this test, I'm going to try to behave more like I would if I didn't already know the answer. Hopefully that kind of makes some sense. So the first thing I'm going to do is hit upload here in the Glowforge interface. Oh, and I should have stuck this USB key in, so let me get that started. So I'm using the USB drive that came with the Shaper so that I can use the same map. So here's my US map SVG. So let me just load that into the Glowforge interface. Wherever possible, I'm going to try to keep this in real time, although there might be points where I just have to put in an edit because it is just too tedious. Okay, so now here's where we would run into kind of the first problem. I only want to cut out one of these shapes, and I don't have the ability within the Glowforge UI. Yeah, if I hit delete, I just delete the whole thing. So what I'm going to have to do in order to be able to use this in any sensible way is open the file in Illustrator. So let's try that. I'm going to go to US Map SVG. Here we go. And let's zoom in here and just see if I can grab just New York, which is easy enough. Copy that, paste it into a new file, and I think that should be just fine. So now I'm going to export this. There. So I had to do that as a first step. Now I should be able to go back here and find my file. Alrighty, so now I've got my New York state outline. So now let's go back to the Glowforge and actually switch it on. And we need to let it do its startup and calibration thing. Since I did that with the Shaper origin and waited for it to boot, I might as well also include waiting for the Glowforge to boot as part of the process here. Although I think I will edit this out because it takes quite a while. Okay, the Glowforge is done calibrating. And now, here's a bit of a trick. I'm going to use, for fairness, the same plywood that I used with the Shaper. In this case, I can stick it through the pass-through slot on the front, so I don't have to deal with the complexity of cutting this. I mean, fortunately it's narrow enough that it's going to fit. Obviously, if it wasn't, then that would be a problem. So now that we've put that in there, let's go back to the Glowforge UI, and we're going to tell it to refresh the bed image so we can get a picture of that. Looks like I got some bonus material here on my outline, but that's okay. Doesn't matter if we get a little extra. Now, the next question I would have is, I want to make it the right size. So what I'm going to do to just sort of estimate the approximately same size is I'm going to stick the New York one that I already did in there. And I'm going to refresh this again. Actually, it'll do that on its own because I opened the lid. So once we get a picture of this up, there we go. I guess pretty well. So I'm just going to set this in there and make it approximately the same size. It doesn't have to be exact. Maybe slightly bigger even. Okay. And now I'll take this out, of course, because I can't cut with that piece in there. Let it refresh. And of course now we have another slight problem, which is I don't know the settings. I've never cut with 1/4" plywood before, so I'm going to go to the community forum and I'm going to do a search for 1/4" plywood and see maybe someone else will tell me what the settings are. Oh look, settings for 1/4" plywood. So let's see what these nice people say. Full power, speed 140. Maybe 135, full power, speed 140, one pass. So that sounds good to me. I'll try that. Let's go back here, and it's an unknown material. Oh, we didn't measure the height, so I need to put in the height. I guess if I want to be really good, I could use my calipers, but I'm not going to. I'm just going to call this 0.25. Okay. And now, manual cut, we will go with speed 140 and power full. That's what they said, right? Speed 140, full power. Okay. So that ought to do it. Now we'll just press print on here, and we'll let it do its scanning thing. And it's the reason I didn't care about the height particularly is because it's going to measure the height. The other height is really only for alignment. So it should figure out the focus height on its own, which it's now doing. Now we'll go back here. Preparing, so it says it'll take 56 seconds to cut, and I'm going to press the start button and we'll see what happens. Hopefully it won't start the house on fire. This being Home Depot plywood, of course, it's probably full of formaldehyde and has various glues and voids and other things. But again, we want to just sort of do a naive, what would happen if I tried it and pressed the button. I'm not super worried for this small amount about safety. Okay, and so I can see that it cut all the way through. That much is apparent because of the fact that the thing dropped down. I didn't even put magnets on to push this down flat. I think because it's being held by the front and the back due to the pass-through slot. I wasn't too worried about holding it down. Okay, so now the machine is finished, and it's graciously allowing me to open it. Pull this out. I usually use a little piece of blue tack here to kind of pick these up. Having trouble today. Of course it has on camera, it has to be really difficult. Okay. So there is, I'm just going to pull this back out because the camera's auto exposure is confused by the brightness of this material here. See how it's smoke trapped underneath. Set my plywood aside. Alrighty, there we go. So I didn't get the size exactly the same, close enough though. So here we go on the left, Shaper Origin cutout. On the right, the Glowforge cutout. As you can see, the Glowforge one has that nice charred, it's really dark in fact, blackened edge. And other than that, let's see, fine detail. I'm going to say, no surprise, the laser cutter was able to resolve fine detail more so than the router, but not bad really. I mean, all the important things, including there's a little indent here that is also visible in there, so that worked pretty well. A little tearing along the edge, maybe, again, it's cheap material. I could have gone in fewer passes or whatever, finish cut, I don't know, I'm not an expert. This pointy corner here was definitely tricky for that. But I mean, all in all, like, I don't think there's any problem with the quality of the Shaper Origin version. The laser cutter, I would say, this was faster. Less setup involved, less clamping, less, you know, you did it all in one pass. I didn't have to hold it, I didn't have to take the thing out and put it away. Of course, my laser cutter is permanently installed, so it's hard to make an entirely fair comparison, but I think the downside, you know, a little bit downside here is that this is burnt. There's smoke along the edge. I would have, if I didn't want that, I would have had to put some masking material on here before cutting it and then peel it off. But really, what is there to say? These two results are substantially identical. This machine is 3 times the price of the Shaper Origin, which is already expensive, so there's that as well. But yeah, it's cool to have a variety of options and tools available when making stuff. So again, I think the Shaper Origin's primary value to me will either be cutting very, very thick stuff. This 1/4 inch is fine, but beyond this, it starts getting a little dicey on the laser, and stuff that I just can't fit on the bed of this machine. So if I wanted to make something really large, it's going to be awesome to have the Shaper available. So I think that concludes my initial review and summary of using that machine. And you know, after I've had it for a while, if I've done more stuff with it, I'll come back and do an update. But for now, that's all I got.